So many bugs. I've invested over $1 million into my startup. Um, Invested, I mean, the opportunity cost that comes along with leaving behind your corporate job as a engineer and spending your time, your money, your attention on a startup, right? For the last 10 years, 2016 was the first time I had the idea to even start a startup, right? I decided that I wanted to gear my life up for having a shot at this, right? And that meant that I'd have to go to community college because my grades weren't that good, and any other option would have cost a lot. So I went to community college, got my associate's degree in engineering, and then transferred to a 4-year college where I took out very little debt to get a 4-year degree as a mechanical engineer, where then I worked in med device for almost 4 years, where I saved up paychecks and invested almost $40,000 into um, startup Omega VR. And that would not have been possible without having sacrificed a lot of things and orientated my life for that, right? With my parents was a big one, right? Not having to pay for rent, that an extra 1,000 plus every month, right? Which could be reinvested into the startup, right? And so that was one of the largest choices growing up. I was a troublesome kid, and so I had to mature enough to be able to live with my parents. And so that's another aspect of how a startup or being a business owner results in maturing and like development, right? Over $1 million from lost, missing out on paychecks, right? The trajectory of a medical device engineer over 8-year period, stocks, paid time off, company 1K matches, whatever me, ChatGPT anywhere between 900K to $1.5 million that I would be losing by working on Omega VR from 2022 till 2030. My plan is to work on Omega VR till 2030 because um, I want to give myself that 10, 12-year span to fully like dive in and see how far I could get by trying and rearranging my life into Omega VR. And the goal is to reassess, right? 2030 comes along to see, has Omega VR been successful enough? Has it shown fruit? Has it shown merit to continue to invest into this? Or is this just going to be a really compelling uh, reason for acceptance into MBA, and I go into corporate life and um, use that as a unique career trajectory, right? That's not the goal. That's not the plan. That's just the backup. There's a lot of sacrifices that have been made into uh, the startup relationships. Then I would be able to find a relationship that I could um, be part of while also being part of a startup, right? Being a founder of something that requires all your attention and your money, and finding someone willing to be part of all of that with you while understanding that your priority is still the startup. And um, finding it, I wasn't looking for it, was truly like a gift from God. And so um, that was a sacrifice that I was willing to make and was making. And um, it's also the sacrifice of, you know, when you have kids, can you have kids while you're still in the thick of it? Um, these are that are burdens that wouldn't be burdens if I was in corporate right now, right? But thing is, the simple what do you do, right? And having to explain that you work on a startup, but it doesn't actually pay any of your bills, and you're a mechanical engineer who worked in med device, but you no longer work in med device because you're working on an assistive technology. But what's an assistive technology? if you're not in that space, you don't know what an assistive technology entails. So you describe it as a VR headset, but then is that a gaming device? No, no, it's not a gaming device. It's a for people with um, disabilities who have accessibility issues for technology, right? And so that comes down to like, hey, brain interface means some sort of technology that can pick up your brain signals and process that into computer inputs. And the computer in play is a VR headset because um, all the technology is already on your skull and VR is already on your head. So it just made sense. And um, you can't really get into all of that when you're at a dinner party and someone asks you, hey, what do you do? So you just say, yeah, I'm working on a startup, and um, sometimes not just say, yeah, you used to work on med device and now you're kind of figuring, but there's a certainty that is lost when you're pursuing something new, right? The difference between a small business and a startup is usually profitable within the first month or two, right? But a small business not profitable for a while, right? And hardware startup takes years to build the infrastructure necessary to even build the thing you want to build, right? Um, you might spend a year developing a manufacturing technique just so you can make the thing you want to make, right? But that's the don't think about when you say, oh, I have this idea and I think the world would benefit by doing this, and I think if I could make it, it could change the world, and it's doable, right? When you convince yourself of that, you don't think about the huge chasm of loss and investment that you need to do, right, um, before you start to see the creation you've been investing your life into. You don't see that until the moment that you've already gone too far in, right? I'm on year 6, right? On legal documentation, it's only year 4, but on working on it, on prototyping, on all of that, it's been years of life that has been invested into trying to make something real from just your thoughts, right? And so, um, a million's like a lot, but it isn't, right? I think an average American in their lifetime makes around $3 million, right? And so giving up a third of my life's income so I could potentially make more, right? And more of an impact too, right? When you think about it, the to be a successful venture, Omega VR needs to make at least $1 million annually, and then I would need to, as the business owner, reap all of that reward. But that would not be a good business move, nor would that be a good business, right? And so, um, it would take years grow to a size of a business where my equity in Omega is worth over $1 million before um, before we can deem a successful venture. But there's so many other ways of deeming it successful in the fact of like the impact it makes in the world, right? Can I even pay myself a livable salary, right? Those are the things that are my like 30-year or 2030, right? Is to, at least myself 40,000 a year, so I don't have to pick up odd jobs just so I can buy food, take my girlfriend out for dinner, you know, hang out with friends, or little things that are kind of necessary to keep the me going so I can keep working and keep finding the energy to be creative, right? And so, $1 million just feels like a low bar, a low investment, right? There's the disappointment in family finding out that you quit your job to work on something that isn't certain, right? It's one thing for it to be already funded, and another to be like, hey, I've been working on this full time for the past year and you haven't known about it. But here are all the reasons you don't need to worry. But there's still that piece of doubt in their minds because they love you and they trust you, but they also trust what they've experienced and known. And taking such a big swing without having certainty or a foot to stand on, just novel, right? But I just think about my parents coming to America, barely speaking English, and creating a life and becoming middle class and raising me and my siblings to be who we are. That is more impressive and more challenging in my mind than what I am doing, right? What I'm doing seems like it's the natural progression of the risk and investment that they were willing to take. So, um, I think that's where a lot of my certainty and willingness to play this game has come from, right? I see this as a net I can hedge. When I invest in Tesla, I'm like, I trust in Tesla's goals, and I think that they will be only worth more in the future. But there's nothing I, as a individual, can realistically do increase that valuation. But for something like Omega VR, every day I'm sweating and investing money into this organization. It um, becomes more profitable, and that's the best kind of game, right? Where you can put your control into making something worth more, right? And so that's why me losing $1 million like a small price to pay for the potential of what Omega VR can be and do in the world, right? So just think about that before you decide to start a startup, because I think unless you're trying to go get investments really quickly and take off and potentially lose a lot of your equity, I think you're going to have to really consider about how you design your life so you can work on a startup, right? Um, I think with the current rate, there are probably a lot of people trying to make something happen, and creating a startup reactively isn't as good as proactively creating a startup. So, um, thank you guys for watching the video. Please like and subscribe. If you guys have any like comments, questions, concerns, just drop down in the comments. I'm curious to see like is there anyone similar who has geared their life and given themselves a timeline to work on their startup? Because sometimes I feel like I'm a starving engineer, right? Where I want to that I'm willing to undergo the discomfort and the not the humiliation, but like the lowering of myself where I could be, right? I know that tomorrow I could be back uh in a white corporate America, but I don't feel like I get to create and be the engineer I want to be in that sense. So, just let me know what you guys are thinking. Thanks for watching the video. Tuned.